Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Backyard Critters. Today we are going to be talking about an often thought of pest, the paper wasp. As I'm sure, most of you in the South are familiar with these critters, and a fair few of you have been stung by them. But before we get started, if you could please leave a comment telling me what you think about this series, or even leave a recommendation for a critter for me to cover. I live in Florida. If I am able to find it, I will most likely cover it. And with that out of the way, let's start the video. So let's start off with identification. The clearest, easiest, and most certain way to tell if you are dealing with paper wasps are their nests. They have hexagonal cells in which they rear their brood, and it flares out in a circular umbrella shape, sometimes giving them the nickname umbrella wasp. The species I have been observing, which I can't seem to find a clear name for, as there are 20 or so species that live in the US, and most of my sources lump them together as Polistes. Anyhow, as far as the insect goes, it is black and yellow with an almost banding type pattern running down its body. They are slender, which separates them from hornets like yellowjackets, which are much larger and build completely different types of nests. Anyhow, what we are looking for is a yellow and black banding color for their body, and if you happen upon their nest, you are likely to see many of these critters as they roost around the hexagonal shape of their nest. It is most certainly a paper wasp. Let's talk a little bit about habitat, behavior, and diet. You are most likely going to run into them if you live in wooded areas. While they do appear in suburban areas as well, they will attach their nests with a base made of chewed plant fibers. What is super neat is that they secrete a chemical that repels ants at the base. I always wondered why and how ants didn't ever seem to mess with them. This particular species essentially makes the same nests with each colony. The size varies from small to very large. The more members, the larger it will be. These adult paper wasps feed on nectar and pollen, and feed their young insects like caterpillars and others. I had always assumed they were predators, so it was a shock to me to find the adults eat nectar and pollen. So these guys are actually pollinators, and do bring some positives, despite their unnerving presence. Some gardeners find these critters to be helpful, since they prey on many garden pests. While they can sting you, and can be aggressive, for the most part, unless you aggravate the nest or the individual, you are unlikely to be attacked. The nest I have been showing is attached to my home. I was fairly close when filming these guys, almost directly under them with a light shining on them. They look for areas that will be clear of rainfall to build their nests. So the edge of your home, your porch, tree limbs, etc. are all locations these guys can be found in. If your area drops temperature too low in later parts of the year, almost all, if not all, workers die out. Females crowd together in places like attics, buildings, and near lights. According to one of my sources, wasps will swarm taller buildings en masse. They have been reporting doing this to news stations and being captured on their cameras at the top of the buildings. One source says the females group together in tall structures and the males follow behind them, creating a massive swarm. But something else that is cool is that they have very distinct facial patterns, and they can recognize each other. Scientists painted over some of the portions of the wasp's faces, and they had a more hostile reaction from the colony until they got familiar with the new pattern. That is so crazy. Now on to reproduction, and to wrap this video up. These wasps have a queen. She lays all of the eggs of the colony. The larvae eat mostly insect parts. Caterpillars in particular seem to be the prey of choice, according to several sources. The queen will chew up the caterpillar, spit it into one of the cells, and lay an egg in it. Larvae will hatch within a few days after being laid. The larvae molt, shedding their skin 5 times over the course of 2 weeks, before spinning a cocoon and blocking off the cell it was laid in. It takes about 1 week for the larva to hatch from its cocoon into a new adult wasp. Once the first generation becomes adults, they start expanding the nest, and the workers take care of the new young. Eventually, a new queen will be born, and she will leave the nest to go and form another colony of paper wasps. One last thing to mention, the footage you see with the larva crawling is a nest I exterminated a few months ago. Somehow one of the larvae survived and fell out of the cell. They are able to crawl and wriggle around. It didn't survive outside of the cell for long, and that could have been because of the alcohol I used to kill the nest, slowly killing it. And that about does it, guys. Tell me what you think about this series, and if you learned anything today. If you have it in your critter-loving hearts, give this video a like, a subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more videos in the future like this. And as always, from the Thegizards and I, have a wonderful day.